So the big question is this: how do investors like us who don't have a PhD in finance or millions to start investing, how do we grow our bank accounts to build real savings and retirements and yet still have the time to do what we really love? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. The Checklist Manifesto. What? Guys, this is insane. Today I want to go over how you can apply the principles and fundamentals that doctors use on a day in, day out basis to every single aspect of your life to minimize risks, completely eradicate unintentional mess ups, and finally, systemize the practices you do in your business, in your job, in your work, so that everything can get done on an on-demand basis without as much involvement with you. 3 very, very powerful concepts. They all come from the Checklist Manifesto. So here's the deal, okay? This guy is a doctor. He's been a doctor for a long time, like a lot of doctors seem to be. They do it for a while, which is really freaking cool. Doctors are awesome, okay? So he writes this book, and in this book, he starts to realize that, like, doctors, they kind of need checklists. So what did he do? Well, first he started using a checklist, because what he would do in his hospital is the same thing over and over. And there was an issue with patient sanity in other hospitals. His hospital was like super awesome. And everyone else's hospital, they kind of sucked, you know? They would have like people die all the time from sicknesses, and he would have very few people die all the time from sicknesses. Why was that? Well, he figured out the power of the checklist. So with his opponent, and he talks about it so much more in the book. But it's this idea, right, that he had a system, right? So you'd have the nurse take out a checklist, and she would start to do her process over and over. Check step 1, put on gloves. Step 2, wash hands before you put on gloves. Step 3, sanitize. Step 4, clean the needle. Step 5, they go through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they would go through this checklist just like an airplane pilot and a co-pilot would go through a checklist, right? So before they take off, they're going to check everything on that checklist every single time. And that's one of the ways that the airline industry stays so safe and has so few incidents, because they run through that checklist every single time. And as Ganawan found out, they run through that checklist each and every flight, but they always are improving it. So he actually went to Boeing headquarters, right? And they found out, like, the guy behind the checklist. And in that checklist, what he did was he realized that, like, whoa, this is really cool. There's an art to creating this checklist. So what did he do? He went back to his practice. He was implementing this checklist over and over to make sure that nobody missed steps, okay? And then he made a foundation, and he started sharing his checklist with hospitals around the world. What happened next? Well, the people were in third world countries like Nigeria, Africa, right? They were using it. And the people that have billion-dollar budgets in Chicago were using it. So it was a very wide range of application. And in each and every one of them, initially, they were a little bit hesitant. They were like, dude, we don't need a checklist. We're smart. We don't need to remember to wash our hands. We're smart, dude. What are you talking about? But get this, okay? About halfway through, they start to realize that, like, whoa, this is kind of helping. And they start to look at, like, the cultural changes between people. And it's really interesting the way that he breaks down how you can have a multi-generational team, a multi-ethnic team, and using that background is a way to further strengthen the application of your checklist. So for him, that meant that he would have maybe a nurse or a male nurse, depending on the country, or a doctor go through the checklist. But they always wanted to make sure that, like, people were able to object if the checklist wasn't followed. Just like with Boeing, right? They have a checklist for every single incident that they could possibly imagine. And in each of those checks, you know, if you look at something like Sully from the movie, right? The co-pilot had the checklist out, but this man was on his tail end getting those flips, the switches, saving his plane, because he knew the flip was up and his guy on the other side was checking through that checklist to make sure everything got done in the same time, because this guy's a surgeon, right? And so he tells a lot of stories on here that seriously made me uncomfortable. But it kind of really expanded my personal horizons and my beliefs. And he's talking about how there were so many people that came into his emergency room. And this kind of ties into number 2, right? Number 2, minimizing those mistakes, getting everybody on the same page. There were like 6, 7, 8 people around this emergency cart, right? And they're got this guy laying down in his bed and he's bleeding everywhere. And everyone's, shoving him through the hallway, pushing him into the emergency room on the same page. They all go through the checklist together. And like, oh my God, they have to give him like this sterilization thing. And he like goes under for surgery and he pokes him in like his heart artery and like explodes. It was so, oh my God. The really important thing to take away from that story, and there are so many like it in this book, that guy probably should have died, but he didn't die. Why didn't he die? Well, before he went into that operation room, on the checklist, they asked him if he had some certain medical condition, and he said yes. It was like some blood vitamin thing. And they said, okay, well, if he starts to lose blood in surgery, this certain medical condition thing isn't going to allow him to regenerate blood, which is why he would have died. And so as part of the checklist, it says prep surgery with a 2 extra bags of blood or something, 2 quarts of blood. And so the nurse went and got the blood on standby at the blood bank, like on next door down, right? And originally, right, this is a high-paced situation. This is some fast stuff happening. And this was a really like difficult surgery, an operation, to get that cancer out. And so he starts to bleed. He starts to freak because apparently they gave him some wrong doses of meds. And they looked in the trash can. They're like, crap, we gave him the wrong doses of meds. And he's bleeding out on the table and because we just poked him, right? And like, so the nurse is like, oh my gosh, don't worry. I have the solution. The guy's heart stops beating. But the nurse comes into the rescue with this extra blood. And they like transfuse it into him, and is so freaking nasty. But it was really, really cool. And it saves his life. He like lives exclusively because that blood was available because she went through the checklist and got all the necessary materials. That is a very, very high level example. And in the Checklist Manifesto, we go on number 3, right? This idea that you're going to streamline your results and better improve your business practices. What he found was that he had this big organization he started, and he was sharing the checklist with major hospitals. And what he was doing was he would go in and he would say, well, what are the systematic problems in their operational structures? I'm going to say that again because that's something very important. Systematic problems in operational structures. What's going wrong over and over and over and over? But no one cares. So in some hospitals, they didn't have enough funding to buy like clean needles. That's insane. They didn't have enough money for everybody to have a bar of soap to wash their hands. That's insane. They didn't have enough ICU units for people to live in. So if they got full, you just died. That's insane. What did he do? He used the checklist to increase sanitation, decrease costs. How did he do that? Everybody has to do check, wash hands, scrub your soaps, do your shruds, clean your needles, stuff like that. People got pissed. They were like, dude, this is boring and stupid at the beginning, just like pilots sometimes were when they started training. But they started to go through the checklist, and what happened? Just like pilots have a better flight experience, these guys in the hospital got stuff done faster, got stuff done more effectively, and used less materials because they were keeping their materials clean, sterile, and they weren't wasting as much. So it actually decreased the overall cost for the hospitals, allowed them to reinvest newfound profits into expansion, growth, and otherwise unmet material needs. Very powerful concept. And think really about how you can take that and apply it in your business. Another really great book that talks about this concept is Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got by Jay Abraham. And I'll link that book review video below alongside the link to grab yourself a copy of the Checklist Manifesto, because they go together very, very well. It's all about thinking very systematically about what you want to get out of your life, out of your business. Like for me, I seriously need to get a better way to bookmark these pages, but there were some very powerful, powerful things in here. And I think really one of the biggest things was when, he was working with these hospitals in Africa, and I mean, these guys, they are living on dirt roads and in dirt homes. It is just a very, very difficult environment. And so the nurses, the doctors, they're very, very spread out. And it's probably the hardest for them to implement a checklist. But as soon as they were able to put that checklist into action and turn it from a thought into a reality, all of a sudden, every single aspect of their service, patient, hospital, growth, development, agreement fundamentally shifted because they were able to change everything they were doing. Not the actions, but the implementation of the actions. So think, for me, he actually has a really, really, really great passage in this book where he meets up with a hedge fund manager that's absolutely crushed the market for years and years and decades and decades. And he talks about the checklist, the very, very specific checklist that guy goes through to analyze a long-term stock investment based on underlying company fundamentals, which is sick. That is awesome. It was like this 75-part checklist. And he says, because everybody go through this checklist on the annual report, and as many times as they've done it, they find the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 stocks that are going to crush it. And then they make 20% a year. I mean, that's insane. That's super freaking cool. That's amazing. So I took that and I said, okay, well, how can I apply this to what I'm doing, right? So I'm trading 9 to noon. And then I also have fundamentals for long-term investments. So I started making my own checklist, which was super freaking cool, for 9 to noon trading, which was awesome. So I started doing that. And then I started to realize, I pretty much, I felt like a doctor, right? I knew what to do every single day, but that checklist was cool because it let me go through the process over. And no matter how much went into it, I knew that end result that came out of it was going to be so, so powerful because it was going to streamline my results and allow me to duplicate my success over and over throughout days of work, through day in and day out. Because it's all about having those principles that are going to stop you from failing, right? So really, really cool stuff, guys. That's the Checklist Manifesto. And as a cool little bonus, if you guys have your copy, I actually have a link below. Just click that link below, and I'm going to actually give you the checklist that I made for trading stocks 9 to noon and absolutely crushing it. This is the personal checklist I've used for portfolio management for about 4 or 5. Read this book a couple months ago, read it, made a checklist, and ever since then I've been using it to trade. And it's really, really cool because it makes sure that I don't skip any of those steps. And I have all the right indicators set up. I have all the right, it's just awesome. It's streamlined everything that I've done with those 9 to noon investments and allowed me to systematically share my system with so many more people. Because right now, the way it works is I used to just share people here's my book, here's how I do it, here's the things I set up with. But now I can share with them the checklist I go through to have the success every morning with 10% a trade on average every day, which is freaking amazing. So click link below and I'll give you guys that checklist. And then obviously there are some amazing book resources below to check out. So really cool stuff, guys. Thanks so much for making it to the end of this video. Hope you guys really enjoyed this content. And if you did, leave me a comment. Let me know you're hyped to get that trading checklist and create your own checklist for your own industries and businesses, which is super fun, super awesome stuff. I really love to hear what you guys are working in and the personal growth that you're going through right now by experiencing these novels. It's really cool stuff. So thank you guys so much. Go out there, crush it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye. Want more stock market secrets? If so, go get your free copy of my best-selling book, 9 to Noon. You can get your free copy plus $11,176 of unannounced bonuses it took me years to uncover completely for free at 9tonoonsecrets.com. Inside 9 to Noon, you'll find the top 38 secrets you can use to double your portfolio every 2 years and make upwards of 10% per trade daily.